So our speaker is Dave Ziolkowski, a biologist, natural historian, and director for the U.S. Geological Service's North American Bird Survey, actively involved in wildlife research for over 30 years, both U.S. and abroad. His childhood interests drew him to graduate studies in tropical biology, and he's taken and led many natural history trips to tropical ecosystems around the world. And if you don't know Dave, you will tonight. And if you see him on the field trip calendar, his walks here in the county or elsewhere are don't miss events. While we can talk to many topics tonight, Dave will talk about Central South America offers some of the most exciting and exhilarating offers some of the most exciting and exhilarating birding on the planet. He'll provide an intro to the region and its fascinating wildlife, describing why every nature lover should want to go there and giving tips for an easy, successful trip. Dave.
Thank you. Wow, that was quite an introduction. I may not need the microphone. Let me try that without. Can everybody hear me?
We need Zoom.
Oh, for the Zoom thing. Okay, yeah, thank you. I just a sign of the times, a little forewarning. About a week and a half ago or so, I had COVID, and I'm still in that kind of sleepy, kind of foggy thing. So if I skip over something or say something wrong, yell it right out, and we'll just revisit it. But as you heard there, I started natural history pretty young, and from a very young age, I remember being just enamored with the tropics and thinking to myself, I can't wait to get there one day. And then my time came, and I went, and it was so much better than I even imagined. It's absolutely incredible. There's so much you can do here with natural history, always something new. You're never bored if you just look at a new area to study. But when you get out of the tropics, everything you look at is new and interesting. So I wanted to offer this talk, an intro to birding in the neotropics. But the truth is, you know about learning birding. You don't learn by going to a slide talk to learn about birding. You go in the field and you wrestle with Impidnax flycatchers for like a year and a half of your life, and then you know birding. And it's the same way in the tropics too. But how you get started with birding is you find something that piques your interest, and then that thing grows into something else, and before you know it, you're a birder. So that's my hope here tonight, is a lot of this stuff is going to be too much for some of you, not enough for others. That's fine. And we're also going to run a little bit late. I can almost guarantee you that. We'll just see how far we get here. But if you have to get up and leave, that's no problem at all. What you see here on the screen in this red area is the tropics. And obviously the tropics goes around the entire globe. But we're going to be talking tonight. Let's see. Does anybody have a laser pointer? This might work. There you go. Okay. So everything from to the right of this is the old world. And then this is the new world. So we're going to focus on the new world tropics here. And then this area right here is called the Caribbean, of course. And the Caribbean is not usually considered to be part of sort of tropical birding. It is technically tropical, but there's a very unique biogeography in the Caribbean, and the species that are there tend to be very old, very distinct. Many of them are what we call endemic, which means localized only to that place. So the bird life is very different across most of the Caribbean islands than on the mainland. So we'll mainly be talking about the mainland. Did most of my graduate work in the Caribbean, so it's close to my heart. Happy to talk to you about that if you want to afterwards, though. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a better idea of what the tropics are really like. So that yellow area there you see that goes from the Yucatan, or just a little bit north of the Yucatan here, Veracruz, south, all the way down to about here. That's the tropics, the New World tropics. Sometimes folks get confused. They think, well, wait a minute, isn't the Amazon all of the tropics? But it's not. The Amazon is this equatorial zone right here. And the equatorial zone gets a lot more rain than the other areas, but they're all similarly tropical in their heat, and also the amount of rainfall they get maybe less than the Amazon, but it's still appreciably more than here in the temperate region. The green areas are the temperate region. That's where we are. Next, please. Okay, so why are the tropics so unique? Well, that really comes down to energy, because the equator in the center of the globe here is getting a concentrated blast of energy from the sun. And all of that energy that's hitting is spread out when it hits the northern part of the globe or the southern part of the globe, depending on what time of the year it is. So there's not as much energy concentrated in one spot. But when you get that much energy concentrated in one spot, you're going to have some interesting phenomena occurring. Next, please. And at the equator, it's instability in the weather, essentially. It's not totally it's not totally unstable, because it's predictable every year and every day, but it is a lot of rain that occurs there. You don't measure seasons there based on temperature changes like you do here in the temperate region. You measure it based on changes in rainfall. So we all know the basics of the water cycle. Lots and lots of energy, just like on your cooktop, makes the water go into a vaporized form, moves up into the air. The higher it gets, the air gets thinner and cooler. It starts to cool. Cool air cannot retain as much moisture as warm air can. So as that warm, moist air rises, it gets cool, and then it dumps all of its rain out. Next, please. You're gonna lose calories tonight with your clicking. I'm gonna have you clicking and clicking and clicking. So here you can see at the globe, right in the center there, this right here is this kind of convection that's occurring, the rising of the humidity and the cooling off, and then that cool air, or excuse me, the warm air, once it gets high and cools and dumps off its water, it then spreads out further towards the poles, and then it drops. And where it drops when it's dry is in these areas that you see here that are red. So this is why Saharan Africa, for example, is so doggone dry, because all of that air from that conveyor belt is losing all of its moisture and then dropping down in that area. Now we're largely spared from it because we have the nice Gulf of Mexico to essentially shield us from it. But Arizona, New Mexico, the highlands of Mexico, they are getting the brunt of that downward air pressure that's very dry. Next, please. So there are names for these cells, and in the tropics, they're called the Hadley cells, and they create low pressure because, again, all the air is going up with this moisture, so the pressure is going up with it. But if you're in those dry areas, you have a lot of pressure on you because the air is coming down on you. And one thing about pressure differences, energy and entropy, they don't really like that. They want to move around and shift that energy. So we go from high pressure to low pressure, and that's what creates wind. If you click the button, there you go. So there you can see the conveyor belts. There's the Hadley cell. And what's going to happen is the air from that tropical high, subtropical high, is going to head down to the equator where the low pressure is. But low pressure, or high pressure, likes to go to low pressure on its right. It's kind of a weird thing about the Coriolis effect in the way it works on the planet. So that's the trade winds, and that's what a lot of historical seafarers used to ride to get across the Atlantic, of course. And we are in the zone of the Farrell. So that means our wind is coming from the west and moving to the east, which is, of course, why we see our weather patterns the way we do. And then the polar easterlies are going the opposite direction, and that's what helps to bring some cold air upon us late in the season. So here you go. If you're in that tropical area right in the middle there, you know your winds are unlike us, mostly coming from the west. Your weather's coming from the east. That's important. It's not just an interesting anecdote. It helps to determine where you're going to go birding when you go birding in the tropics. Next, please. So let's just visit California real quick. So in California, you have this Pacific moisture coming up, blowing up the mountainside here. If you've ever been out there, a lot of wind on the west side of the Sierra Nevadas. That air masses rising up, and then it condenses when it hits the cold air, and then it rains, and the rain is on the west side of the mountain, and that's why you have the sequoias and the redwoods. But on the east, you have Nevada, and those folks like it dry. And they don't really have much of a choice, because that's where Death Valley is, and Owen Valley, and that's where the Great Basin is. So why does North America look the way that it does? Well, that's a big part of it, those winds we were talking about. Now, we're lucky because those winds are dry. By the time they get to us, they pick up a ton of moisture from the Mississippi Valley, and then they carry it east to us. So we're not so bad off out here. Okay, next, please. Same thing is happening in South America, but the opposite direction. Because remember, we're in the Ferrel cell, they're in the Hadley cell, so it's coming from the east. So if you want a bird in a dry place in the tropics, where should you go? Go to the west of the mountain range there. So the Andes is running down, and you want to be on the west side of that. And you can see right here, here's the moisture coming in, and look how much of it is in the Amazon River Valley. So when people talk about the tropics, you have a better idea now for where all the rain is, and that it's not all just the Amazon. There's a lot of variation in the tropics. Next, please. So you may want to go to some place in the tropics where there is primeval rainforest. And this is a great example of a tree that is a primeval rainforest tree. Look how wide that is at the base. Now, that's not like a redwood tree. It's not solid wood all the way across. Those are called buttresses. And the reason is because the soils in the tropics generally are not very deep. Most of the nutrients are in the very top, and the rest of it is, in some places, laterite or clay, lots of things that are not really conducive to deep tap roots. And so these large trees have buttresses to support them. Next, please. You may want to go to a cloud forest. And if you want to go to a cloud forest, you want to find a spot that's a little higher elevation. So for example, Costa Rica, a lot of people go to Volcan Arenal to see the cloud forest there, or all the way down the spine into Colombia and down through South America, you can experience this cloud forest. Next, please. And there you might be looking for birds like this collared trogon, which many of us who went there in the past got this as our orange-bellied trogon tick, which has now been lumped back together again with collared trogon. Trogons are big birds, very characteristic of the tropics. They have a really throaty kind of frog-like call. They eat a lot of fruit. And we have one that comes up into the mountains of Arizona sometimes, the elegant trogon, which is a nice big trogon. But the ones down in the tropics, usually they can look very similar. You look at the tail a lot of the time. The undertail tells you a lot about them. Next, please. You may want to go to grown pasture land or shrub type stuff, because there might be certain birds that you're looking for in certain parts of South America, such as, next please, the red siskin, critically endangered. You can get this on the Guyana Shield up into Venezuela. It's very much like our siskin. It's a small bird, but it's all red. Still has the nice patterning. You can see the bird on the lower left there in the wing, very similar to our pine siskins. You might want to go to the grasslands. There are extensive grasslands on the east side of South America and down into the Pantanal, where it starts to get wet as well. And you might be looking for something like this guy. This is probably the weirdest animal I've ever seen. To see this thing run, it's very strange. It's like you just expect parts of it to be falling off when it's running. It's a big animal. It's about this big. It's a giant anteater, very heavy, very big. Next, please. And you guys probably know what this bird is, right? I mean, if you saw this in the sky, you would identify it, right? Turkey vulture, right? Not here, though. This one is a yellow-headed vulture, a lesser yellow-headed vulture. There's two yellow-headed vultures. It's such a weird thing to think about this bird that you've known forever, a turkey vulture, and you go there and you see it, but yet it only flies very low to the ground and only in grasslands. And yet you see turkey vultures flying over it doing the normal turkey vulture thing. It's a real mind game right there. But you can see out towards the wingtips there, it has some white out there, something you might associate with a black vulture. And actually, the greater yellow-headed vulture is even more habitat specific in foothills. So that's a tough bird to get sometimes. Next, please. In those wet areas, you might be looking for capybara. These things are really big, but they are cute. I have to tell you, I've been around some of these things before, and they make really, really cute sounds. They really domesticate well, and they like being around people. And they travel in those little herds like that. That's okay. You might want to go to coastal areas in the coastal strand. There's a lot of coastal areas in the tropics, not to mention seabirds, of course, but there's a lot of other birds there that are only found in these habitats. Next, please. Such as the blood-colored woodpecker. I mean, if there's not a more goth bird in the world, I'd like to know it. That bird is a very cool little bird that's found on the Guyana Shield, and it's only found in this coastal strand type habitat. Next, please. You might want to go to mangrove swamps. Mangroves are very cool. We live in estuaries, so we're kind of like, sort of like cousins of the mangrove. Like we're like hobbits in the Shire kind of thing, living in different places. We are kind of estuarine people. We're like mangrove people. When you get to the mangrove forest, they smell a lot like the Chesapeake Bay at times. They're very interesting places, and they have some very unique birds. Next, please. Such as the scarlet ibis, which is a really cool bird, pretty easy to see in most places on the eastern side of South America, northeastern. Next, please. Whoop. You might also look for this one, the Rufous crabhawk. A lot of people go out for this thing. This is a big bird, and it eats crabs in the mangroves. Very cool, very cool. So some suggestions on places to go if you haven't gone to the tropics before. So the tropics, you could go anywhere. It's a huge area. It's like saying, have you been to North America? It's a really big area. But there are some things to contend with when you get there. And there are a couple places that are really good entry-level places to go to. So one place would be in Panama, the Canopy Tower and the Canopy Lodge. And they also have an extension now that's down in the edge of Panama and Colombia. It's a pretty neat area, very remote out there. It's kind of like if you've ever done tent camping in Africa, it's very similar to that. But it's a very well-run group. They all speak English. They all understand the expectations of travelers. So there's not a lot of a learning curve to really travel there. You don't have to worry about mosquitoes because you're in the canal zone, and the US had occupied that for a long time, and malaria is not endemic there. They use the US dollar. So these are all very good things. And generally, it's a very safe place. I mean, cities, don't go into cities. I mean, that's a good rule of thumb, even here. But they have a place called the Canopy Tower, and this is absolutely the best place for beginners. You can sleep in one of these lower levels, and then you go up top. Next, please. And in the morning, you have your coffee looking out over the Panama Canal here in the Bridge of the Americas, and you are at treetop level right there. Now, this isn't the high canopy. This isn't mature forest. This is like, kind of our forests around here. Like most of it was cut 100 years ago, or even maybe 50 years ago, but it's a very good place to get your legs underneath of you for tropical birding. There's a lot of birds to learn because here in North America, 700-800 species of birds, considering how you deal with vagrants and those kinds of things. In tropical America, you go to Colombia, you're looking at like 1,900 species. That's a lot of birds to wade through. Next, please. You're not far from Panama City. It's amazing that you can fly into some place and access an amazing biological area that close to a city. It's really astounding. There are other places to go, though. The other place that I would highly recommend if you're going to do a first trip would be Trinidad and Tobago. There's a company called Caligo that works out of Trinidad and Tobago at the Asa Wright Nature Center. That's another outstanding place to go. The bird community is a little bit less there. So you're not going to find the high diversity that you do in Colombia, not as much in Panama, but you get a Caribbean influence there. And Tobago is like, you know, really nice to have a rum punch at the end of the day. You don't have to worry about city dwellers there. It's just beautiful white sandy beaches. So there's a lot of nice recreation there for spouses too. Hint, hint. The other thing that's nice about going to the Canopy Tower is you get to see the Panama Canal, which is just an astounding feat of engineering. It's well worth going and taking a trip there. Does it rain in the tropics? Yeah, it does a lot. And this is our friend Carla Dove, whom we travel a lot with. She's an ornithologist down at the Smithsonian. She's been described by a friend of ours at Cornell as gosh, what did he say? Dolly Parton of the ornithological world. And that's very much like it. So here she's demonstrating what you do when it rains. You just deal with it. That's pretty much how it is in the tropics. So you can buy a lot of rain gear and everything, but probably the best thing you can do is just deal with it and get used to it. It's warm rain. It's going to rain a lot. You're going to take a siesta in the afternoon and come out after the rain. They do speak Spanish in the tropics, by the way. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So if you're going down to Bolivia or Uruguay or someplace like that, or even if you're going into a part of Mexico that's away from a populated area, you should expect that you must know Spanish to be able to get around. That you don't have to worry about that in Trinidad and Tobago. You don't have to worry about that in the Canal Zone of Panama. And you don't have to worry about that in a lot of other places too, like even in Ecuador, they use the US dollar and a lot of people speak English. I had hair then and I wasn't wearing glasses. I don't know if you noticed that. I wonder what changed. One of the things you should definitely do when you travel is get out to the local markets. Don't be afraid to go out to local markets. That's a very friendly place. Use your spidey senses whenever you travel, of course, but markets are an amazing place to try new foods. You can eat 35 different kinds of mangoes. It's incredible. They're all over the place down there. There's something like 90 different types of bananas. They grow them down there, but they don't send them up here because they don't market well or they don't package well. There's lots of other things you probably never tried. How many of you have tried cashew apples, which is the fruit part that the cashew grows off of? All these things are in these markets. Make it a great experience when you go down there and visit these places. So people are often frightened in the tropics the first time they go down there. They hear sounds all over the place. Something's scurrying in the brush or something. It could be a furlance. It could be a bushmaster just waiting to get you. It's not a furlance. It's not a bushmaster. It's a cane toad. And these things are big. The big ones are almost the size of a football. They're really enormous. And yeah, like this is why I'm not going to get done this time because I'm going to do these little anecdotes.
Will not turn on all the sudden.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On yesterday.
What?
Oh, maybe it's a different conversation. So I thought maybe I turned off the button and then I was like, there's no button. So these things here, by the way, on all of our toads, these are called parathoid glands. These glands right here produce a toxin called bufotoxin. So if your dog ever comes in and it's slobbering a bunch, not looking well, probably got into a toad. Our toads do it too. If you molest them a lot, they'll make these little white things come out of there, and that's the bufotoxin. So these cane toads are all over the place in the tropics. They're called cane toads. They're really marine toads, but they've been introduced all over the world to control beetles in sugarcane fields, which beetles fly and they climb, but toads don't. So they end up eating everything else, including small mammals. Next, please. It's also likely to be an ameiva, one of these large lizards. They're They can be about 2.5 feet long. They're everywhere in the tropics, the New World tropics. Pretty much everywhere you go, there's several species of amoeba, and they're just scurrying around in the undergrowth all the time. Nothing to worry about. It could be an agouti. This little snooty agouti here is trying to get some nuts. There are lots of different trees that produce, here we call them mass producing trees. They produce things like acorns and beech nuts and stuff like that. But in the tropics, there's just tons of different classes of nuts. Some of them have very large husks on them, and so rodents specialize for eating them. There's another one that comes out at night, the paca, which is much bigger than this guy. But these are very commonly scurrying around in the undergrowth. Can give you a little bit of a scare, but nothing to worry about. Snakes. This is pretty much what you're going to see. I mean, this is a little tiny snake here. It's a little colubrid snake. It's like a false coral snake. I mean, I've traveled in the tropics extensively, and I can tell you the number of times that I've seen venomous snakes, it's minuscule. And the times when I've seen them, I'm usually traveling with a herpetologist, and they're finding them all over the place. And I'm like, wow, you know, you just don't see them most of the time. And every now and then you'll hear one story of somebody getting bitten. But how many of you have been stung by yellow jackets? Probably most of you. So, you know, something to consider there for perspective. So one thing in the tropics, keep your hands to yourself. Like, it's not just good grade school policy, it's good policy in general. Most trees are armored with something, not because they want to hurt you, but because they have to deal with lots of other things like lianas, for example, or climbing vines. Here you notice the number of vines that have been introduced into North America in the last 30 years is astounding. And so you see dead trees all over the place now. And that's because trees die when like 2 or 3 vines get up into their canopy. Well, in the tropics, trees know how to deal with that. So they are armored with flaking bark, kind of like sycamores, and also a lot of them are armored with these kinds of things that keep lianas from being able to climb up the tree and getting a good hold. The other thing too is there's other things living in those trees. These are Azteca ants here. They are not a problem as long as you're not messing with their nests. And right next to them is a type of wasp. And it's a little bit like our paper wasps, looks a little bit like them, but in a different genus entirely. And they're smart. They know no mammal's going to climb along that branch. And that's a good indicator to you that you shouldn't either. So there's those kinds of things. But generally in the tropics, you just don't have to really worry about a lot of things because most species don't occur in the abundances they do here. So yellow jackets occur in the thousands in nests right now, but not in the tropics because there's no abundance issues like there are here. You know not to touch this thing, right? Definitely don't eat it. My colleague, Maki Lutmerding, ate a woolly bear caterpillar for 35 cents to get a soda. He ate it, and then he really needed the soda, and they reneged on him. And he had hairs stuck in his tongue. And that's just a woolly bear caterpillar, which we all pick up. So we know, don't pick up larvae like this. But, next please, you might look at this one and say, that looks cute. Do not touch that. That's a flannel moth. And our flannel moths, their larvae are small, but these are big. And they really do look soft, but that would be a very painful end to your day right there. So again, like just not touching stuff. The things you think are going to kill you aren't. Like these dendrobatid frogs right here in the middle. This is Dendrobatis auratus, which is the black and green poison dart frog. Are they really poisonous? Well, you know, if you lick them or something, or you put it in your eye, yeah, you'd feel some tingling. But otherwise, no, there's really only one, the golden one, that's really dangerous. But most of them are not a big issue. There are a lot of frogs, by the way, in the tropics, and I would encourage you to go out and look for some of them at night because they're fascinating. This is a red-webbed tree frog from Panama. Why the webbing? Well, they jump between trees, and that helps them to essentially catch the wind a little bit and glide. Many of these frogs are nesting in epiphytes, Epiphyte, epi means on, phyte means plants. These are plants that grow on other plants. They're all over the place in the tropics. And these bromeliads, which are these kind of long strap-like leaves here. And if you're anything like me, after you hear a talk like tonight, you're going to run out and buy a bunch of these things. Just to imagine frogs running into your bromeliads. But these bromeliads hold water. They're like tanks, and the frogs lay eggs inside of those tanks. This frog is one of the coolest frogs ever. It's called the centralinid frog. These things are pretty abundant. They are up underneath the leaves during the day. So you probably have seen gray tree frogs, and they're in the corners or in tree holes, places that are pretty dark. Not these centralinid frogs. They're just out there on the undersides of big leaves. Well, it's pretty easy if you're a predator then to look up and see the silhouette of that frog. So the way they deal with that is when they're resting during the day, they look like that on the right. They take the red blood cells and hide them in their liver, essentially. So they're transparent. And when you pick these up, which is one of the coolest things I think Olivia, my wife, had seen when we were in the tropics one time, is I said, let me show you this frog. And you could see its heart beating right through its body. It's absolutely amazing. The left side shows you how they usually look like eggs because they hang out with their eggs to protect their eggs. Everything in the tropics is cool. Most things want to look like a frog or something big so they don't get eaten. This is just a regular pentamimid stink bug, but you can see most birds would look at this thing and think, I think that thing's a frog. That might be too big for me. Next. Here's a leaf-footed bug. Everything is prettier in the tropics. It just is. It's like everything's better with bacon. Everything's better in the tropics. It really is. Look how colorful that bug is. Now you see ours, it's just brown. Don't pick those up, by the way, anywhere. Here's a roach. There are tons of roaches. We think of roaches as cockroaches, but actually, just like most wasps or bees, you know of only 1 or 2 or 3 if you are just learning about natural history, but there's actually hundreds of species of bees that never bother anybody, and wasps. Same thing with roaches. Tons and tons of roaches in the world, and even here that you don't really know unless you get into that aspect of natural history. But in the tropics, they're super colorful. Grasshoppers are gorgeous in the tropics too. Next. But don't make the mistake and think that they're cuddly, because they're not. Like if you get near them, they know how to handle themselves. They're not going to hurt you, but they're going to try to scare you because that's what things do down there. Here's a cicada. Our cicadas are really cool, mostly in the way they sound. Theirs sound cool and look cool too. There are tons of butterflies. Anybody can talk for hours on the butterflies there, but everything you see there, if you just take a second and look at it in a different light, you'll see it's pretty phenomenal. This is a little tiny butterfly that came in very small, and I just happened to turn my light on it and notice that this black butterfly turned iridescent blue. Astounding. Next. So, and click once more. If you take a look, you'll see how the blue changes depending on the angle that you look at it. That's like these big butterflies called morpho butterflies, which fly down the paths. And as you see them, they just slam blue into your retina, blue and black, blue and black. And the way they do it, next, is they have these lamella, these layers, and these layers have a pigment underneath. So the pigment is the little bridge type thing that you see here. Melanin, which is the black pigment, structural pigment that we've sometimes talked about at the wingtips of birds. It allows them to resist bacteria and also abrasion. Well, here are these lamella that are in the scales at the top. When the light comes down and hits it, all the colors of light come down through it except for blue. And there's different layers so that if you're looking at it from a certain angle, you will see it bouncing off each of the layers, so it becomes even more blue as you're looking at it. Next, please. Birds are a little bit similar to that. Slightly different system, but this is a cotinga. Beautiful bird. These birds are usually very high up in the canopy. This is a picture I took from the canopy tower, actually. One of the best places in the world to see cotingas right at eye level. just really cool birds. These morpho butterflies, by the way, the blue morpho is on the left-hand side, but the one on the right is an opalescent one. That's what happens when you don't have the black pigment melanin. You're no longer blue. You're just reflective opalescent. So it's the same structure without the melanin underneath of it. Many of the butterflies in the tropics also have transparent parts of their wings. This is a metal mark species. We have metal marks here. They're very colorful, not translucent at all, but this one has translucent patches. Next. And this one, the blushing phantom. How cool is that? If you're running along the ground and you see that, you think, wow, that is definitely a frog that's just about to grab me and eat me. Another example of how this transparency is used together with these other mimicry type mechanisms. So here's a video. Just watch this and imagine watching that for like 15 or 20 minutes. It's like mesmerizing. These are leafcutter ants. And these trails go all throughout the forest. You can watch them endlessly. It's just so cool because each time you watch them, you see new things. This is not just a bunch of ants carrying leaves here. Here's a little ant right there. Why is that ant up there? Is that a lazy ant? No, that ant's actually working really hard. That ant's job is to keep phorid flies and other flies who want to lay eggs on those ants. There's also a lot of other creatures who want to climb onto those ants as well. So those little guys ride along. They also clean the leaves. Once they get to the colony, they clean the leaves to make sure there's no destructive fungus or bacteria on there. Next, please. Well, you know what? I missed something that I was going to throw in there. I was going to show you what the underground nest of leafcutter ants look like. It goes from the floor to the ceiling underground. It's an enormous system, like an upside down tree with little pockets all over the place where they grow fungus. And that's what they eat, is the fungus. They don't eat the leaves. The leaves have a lot of lignin and other things in them, a lot of chemicals that the plants exude to keep herbivores from liberating the proteins that are in there. So they let the fungus do the work for them. In fact, when queens leave the colony, each new queen has a little pocket that she puts some of this fungus in as a starter. Kind of like, you know, creating your own beer thing. Pass around your strains. The forests are just amazing. Here's one of these trees, very lacy-like, you know, a leafcutter ant colony could denude this tree in a short period of time. Like they are just incredibly efficient workers. But if you look up in the trees long enough, you're going to see some other stuff in there too. You see a lot of primates. This is a Joffrey's tamarin. You notice it has a long tail. Lots of these things that climb around have long tails. This is a primate. I don't like the word primitive, but I think some people would call it a sort of primitive primate. Evolution doesn't really work that way, but yeah, it's not what you would consider a cognitive primate in the sense of like an ape or something like that. These guys are super specialized and they know the forest like the back of their hand, and they travel large areas and they find fruiting plants. This right here, what you're looking at, in Panama, there's a tower that was built that's very high, a couple 100 feet high. And you can see above the actual primeval rainforest canopy, like a full mature rainforest canopy. And you see some of these emergent trees that are above it. And what you see when you're up there is monkeys. It's absolutely astounding. Now, it'd be really tough to see it here if you hit next. Maybe I have one in there. Here, there's a baby. And this one here, you can't see it, but that has a baby on it as well. That's its tail right there and its foot. I mean, can you imagine hanging with your little baby 150 foot above the ground? It's kind of incredible. Now, I know what you're thinking when you see that. That is a big set of teeth. for a monkey that eats plants, right? Why do they have large canines? They have large canines because they're eating fruit, and that fruit, you know, plants are bribing animals, right? They're bribing animals like hummingbirds to come and get their nectar. They're giving them nectar to bribe them, and then they put a little pollen on their head, and then they go off to the next plant and they carry it there, which is much more efficient than just spreading your pollen all over the place like a pine tree does or something like that. So they're bribing, and they also bribe animals to carry their seeds, but they don't want the animals to break the seed or to extract the living part of the seed. But that's just what these guys want to do in a lot of cases. So they use those large teeth to get through the thick parts of the fruit. Now, I will address that. If you could go back, I will address the elephant in the room here. Yes, that is its tail wrapped around the branch there. And yes, that is a flat spot of the tail right there. And in fact, that part of the tail is like your fingerprints. It's just like your fingers. And each monkey has your unique one. This is a howler monkey, by the way. And it sounds, you hear these all over the tropics and they sound like. Yeah. Here's a sloth. There are two types of sloths, generally speaking, two-toed and three-toed. You can see how narrow the feet are on this one. This is a two-toed sloth. Two-toed sloths kind of have like a pig nose almost, and when they're eating, they get very excited and it drips a lot. It's kind of gross. This is a three-toed sloth. This is a little tiny baby three-toed sloth right here, which is wild, I think. Go to the next one. You'll see the adult, and you can see 3 toes right on its hand right here. There's also these things on there, bugs. Well, those are moths. And this green stuff here is a type of algae that grows in the hairs. The hairs actually are hollow. They have little grooves in them, and that algae grows in there, and these moths lay eggs on there, and they live there. This is a male. That orange patch on his back with the black in the middle, he releases some scent in there. It's pretty stinky if you're ever near one of these things, but very cool. And they are seen during the day sometime, but more often active at night. And night is an amazing time to go out in the tropics. So this is, you're going to think I'm really plugging the Canopy Tower here. It's just a very convenient place to go. I have led trips there, and I have to say, of the many places I've led trips to, most people generally say they love that place the most just because of things like this rainbow mobile, which you take out at night and drive around on roads with spotlights while finding lots of things in the trees like kinkajous and all kinds of stuff like that. It's an amazing experience. Next. You'll find things like boat-billed herons, which are kind of like our night herons, but with a really enormous bill. Next. And things like great tinamou. Tinamoos are really big birds. You'll hear them in the morning. They have this long, mournful call. I won't make it or we'll be here all night, but really, really cool birds, but easiest to find at night. Things like caprimulgids, which we call night jars. Here's one called the paraque, and you can find them all over the tropics and flat areas, and they call at night. Here's another thing that you would find, and these are very cool. You don't only find these at night, you also find them during the day. There's generally 2 of them. There's the common potu, which is this one, and there's another one too called the great potu. And one of them has a really nice song that's like, and then the other one's like, you can do some homework and find out which one's which, but that's how they sleep, just like that. Next. Here's a choco screech owl. We don't spend a lot of time doing this in North America. I got to tell you, I live at a house where I have screech owls. They nest in a little box in my backyard, and I find them like this all the time. Wherever branches come together, when I'm walking around Centennial, I'd say probably more than half of the time, We see barred owls just right off the edge of the trail, right where branches meet, just hanging out clear as day, right underneath of there. And tropical birders are really good about finding those. This is a pygmy owl. This is a tiny little owl. It's a little bit bigger than a saw owl. Pygmy owls are kind of the same all over the world. They make this little tooting sound. This is the ferruginous pygmy owl. He's singing right now. That's why his head's out like that. Their thing is they fluff their throat out. Most owls fluff their throat out. If you ever see a great horned owl, probably going to lose a little bit of respect for him when you see him singing, because he sticks his tail straight up and he puts his head up. It's an awkward position. I'm just saying. Here's a caracara. This is a raptor. Yeah, talking about owls, we might as well talk about some other cool raptors in the tropics. We know caracaras. You go back a second. We know caracaras. They occur here in Texas, Louisiana, a bunch of other places, but they're especially common down in the tropics because they're kind of like vultures. And so you can see they have that bare skin on the front of their face. Next. Here's a very cool hawk, a white-tailed hawk. If there's ever burning going on, which there's a lot of burning in the tropics, if there's ever burning grasslands, you will find white-tailed hawks there. You'll find them that way in North America too. You go into the Mexican highlands, you'll find this bird. Wherever there's burns, that's where this bird is. Here's one. That branch right there is actually a very small branch, about the size of my thumb. And you might think that's a tiny hawk. Well, that's exactly its name, the tiny hawk. It's one bird with a name we can all agree on, the tiny hawk. And it's an accipiter, so it's even smaller than our sharp-shinned hawk. Here's a bat falcon, another cool bird. This comes out in the evening and eats bats. Let me show you a little video here real quick about one of the coolest things about birding in the tropics.
To find prey, the ants must
These are
first touch
army
it.
ants.
The irony is that this, the most successful hide-and-seek player in the forest, is almost completely blind. It distinguishes the living only by their movement. As long as an animal remains still, it is safe.
You know he felt that, right?
But the
It's like,
slightest twitch will give it away. Within seconds, the prey is pinned down.
Look at that big
Within
worker
minutes,
there.
it's torn
Huge
apart
one.
at its joints. The more the prey struggles, the more the ants engage.
So they have a division of labor, different size
Right across
classes.
the raid front, prey of all sizes are driven from their hiding places. Even wasps must abandon their homes when the ants arrive. Everything alive in the path of the raiders, overwhelmed by sheer numbers.
So why show that? The reason. So why show that? To really impress to you how frightening these things are to animals that live in the rainforest. Next, please. This is the coolest thing about birding in the tropics in my mind. Next. That's an ant bird. When you hear this sound in the tropics, you run to find them. Because those ants are making everything run. And those birds, there's a spotted ant bird in the back. This one right here is a spotted ant bird. This is an oculated ant bird. Oculated ant birds are what you call obligate army ant foragers. They only forage at army ant swarms. The spotted ant bird, on the other hand, he's kind of a facultative dude. He'll come in, he'll forage sometime, and then he'll move on and forage on other things. Those army ant swarms, there are some birds that are associated with those things, like ground cuckoos, that you don't find any other way. They're always a hot topic in tropical birding. It's a good sound to learn. These birds are often very cool looking. Here's one from the guy on his shield, the white plumed ant bird. They have a whole ecosystem around them. The ant birds make droppings. The butterfly, next, the butterflies eat the minerals and the salts from the droppings of just those ant birds. Amazing. They follow the ant birds. Next. And there's lots of other creatures that tied to this, like this one right here. Next.
Hey, quick question. Could I? Seriously? Hey there, nope. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Okay, settle down. I can explain. It's straightforward. My name's Pete, and I'm your new butt.
That's really about the size of it. That little beetle latches on to the gaster of one of the ants, and then he very quickly gets himself so tight around that ant that he can't be pried off, and then he'll be preened by the other ants and get the smell of the colony on them, and he'll be transported around and then occasionally come off and filch little pieces. This is an example of how, when you look in your field guide, everything is called an ant something. Not everything, but about half of everything in every tropical guide. They're not all ant birds. They don't all do the same thing. This is an ant wren, a white fringed ant wren. This is a black crested ant shrike, much more massive bill on it. These birds have nothing to do with army ant swarms, really. But lots of things will come in to an army ant swarm if it goes through their territory. So there's a bird nest in here. Can you see it? You see it? You point to it. Yes, perfect. Perfect. That is a nest of a type of a hummingbird called a hermit. Next, please. This is what it looks like up close. That nest is very small. The eggs are about the size of Tic Tacs in there, and they build it right on the end of a leaf. Next. Here's another one right here from a different kind of hermit built right on the end of a fern frond. Next. These hummingbirds are diverse. They're really amazing. The emeralds, they stake out these little areas. They're kind of small hummingbirds. Next. All of them advertise with iridescence on them. Ours mostly have the iridescence on the throat, the gorget. In the tropics, they could be all over the birds. Some of these things, like the ones on the upper right, these little tiny coquettes, they specialize on little tiny flowers, other ones on big flowers. We don't have enough time to get into those, but next. This one is called a hermit. These are the big hummingbirds. Hummingbirds break into different ecological classes, generally speaking. There's ones called trap liners, like these hermits. They might travel 1 kilometer or more to hit food resources, heliconia patches, moving along as they go. And they're big. They shove everybody else out of the way. These are stingless bees, by the way. They don't sting you. They don't have a stinger, but they do bite you. Here's an example of a hummingbird, this little plain-bellied emerald here, who stakes out a territory and drives everybody else away. And then there's other hummingbirds that are smaller called filchers, who come in when they're chasing somebody else out and steal some nectar. Notice this thing's tongue here. Let me tell you a little bit about that. That's kind of cool. Next. The structure of a hummingbird bill, look it again, please, looks like this. Oh, the back one. Nah, maybe it's not going to play. That one. Okay, well, that's a shame.
Go back one.
Oh, there it is. Okay, that's the length of a hummingbird bill right there. And at the very end, there's a tip that comes out, has a feathery end to it almost, some scales on it, and it pulls nectar in, and then that kind of like semicircle structure you saw flexes in and out like a pump and pulling nectar in via capillary action up into the bill. So there's a lot of mechanics going on every time you see a hummingbird at your feeder. Don't take your hummingbird feeders down, by the way. Leave them out in November and even into December to get some western hummingbirds, which are becoming more common there. Now, mammals, we don't do it that way. We're just like brute force kind of animals, aren't we? And that's the way bats are. One day I was walking by a hummingbird feeder at night, and I felt something fly past my face. And I looked over, and there was a bat drinking out of the hummingbird feeder. These are nectar bats. And just like birds, they're smart enough to know, hey, I can shift from feeding on flowers to feeding on hummingbird feeders. Bats are everywhere in the tropics. It's like I love looking for bats. I'm always looking for them as I'm walking around. This is up underneath of a dead leaf cluster. You see them up underneath of there. Next. You see them on tree trunks sometimes. They have little white lines that make them kind of blend in a little bit. Next. I even just stick my camera up into dead trees and take pictures, and they're up in there. You never know what you're going to see, and there's all kinds of interesting bats. Some of them feed on frogs at night, hone in on frogs. Very interesting. So we got 15 minutes left here, and I'm going to run through a bunch of birds here. One thing that's different about birding in the tropics, in the New World tropics, that's different than any place else, is that all over the world, at different latitudes, you have different sort of ecological niches. And those niches get occupied by whatever genetic lineages are there. And so you may have convergence from different lineages taking advantage of the same ecological niche. Well, in the New World tropics, many of those niches are occupied by flycatchers. So if you find flycatchers hard up here, you just call it right now, because this is not the talk for you. No, it's actually not so bad. It's pretty interesting, actually, because all of those flycatchers, all the flycatchers you have here, they all do pretty much the same thing. There are some that specialize a little bit more on wasps, for example, like olive-sided flycatchers, and some that will handle large dragonflies and others don't. But in the tropics, these things are specialized to the max. Now, the generic one, the tramp that you find everywhere, is the TK, the tropical kingbird. They are everywhere. They're the ubiquitous flycatcher, kind of like our Western flycatcher. They're very truculent. They're really, out there. Next. You have another group, which are these black and white flycatchers, and there's a ton of these things depending on what country you go into. We kind of think of them as kiskidees because that's the one that comes up into our area most, the great kiskadee. But this is a lesser kiskadee here. You would know that because its bill is a lot longer. Its body frame is a little bit slighter. Next. Here's the great kiskadee, and I show from the back here. You can see the bill is a big honking bill, but you see it has this kind of red fringing on the flight feathers, almost all of its flight feathers. So those are the kinds of things that you want to look at. Go to the tropics and you're like, these things all look the same. And social flycatchers, you can always tell them because there's always more than one. But that's not true. It's only true in that case. Social flycatchers are small and they're pretty common too. The flycatchers occupy the niches from the smallest to the largest. This is a teeny little bird. I went on a collecting trip with some friends down to northeastern South America some years ago, and this is one of the birds they were looking for as a range extension, the bearded tachuri. This thing, I was looking for this thing. It's the size of a grasshopper. It is so small. And when I found it, it was right in front of me. It is really teeny. Next. Here's another small flycatcher, but this is, again, how you start to tell the flycatchers after you get down there a couple times. This is one of the toady rosters flycatchers. It's called a toady flycatcher, actually. The bill, look how it's spatulate and it comes out. It's not a pointed tip. It's kind of round at the end. The studies that have been done on this from folks who, mostly natural historians down in the tropics, have found that this thing eats a lot of the mustelid flies, like house flies and those kinds of things. They don't fly long distances. They just make little jaunts. That's kind of what this thing is specialized for. Next. They have these cool little teeny tiny globular nests that are all over the place. So we have a few minutes here. I'll just rip through some of the kinds of birds that you would find in the tropics that are like quintessential tropical birds, tell you a little bit about them. This is an Aris aries here. Don't stick your finger in that thing's beak. That's a good way to lose a finger. But the reason those beaks are that long, it's not really to make damage. Those bills are actually filled with air. And they're very interesting construction that gives it a lot of strength through one or two dimensions, but not every dimension. There are trade-offs in that bird's physical design. But it's to allow the bird to reach out. It has a lot of mass in its body core, but it needs to reach out. So the way it solves the problem of trying to get fruit that's far away is rather than jumping, it uses this long bill, and you can see how gently it's picking things up at the end there. That's called a collared Araceres. It's kind of a small toucan. The bigger toucans are like these things here, these keel-billed, and they use their bill in exactly the same way. And heck, if you're gonna have a long bill, you gotta have a lot of structure. That's how you make it strong so it doesn't break. So it has to have a lot of reinforcement, a lot of vertical struts in there. And if you've got that much real estate, you might as well advertise with it, right? So that's what they do, is they all have advertisement on their bills. But an interesting thing about toucans is almost everywhere you go in the New World tropics, there's two lineages of toucans co-occurring. One is the yelper and one is the croaker. This is the croaker here, the kill-bill toucan, and it's with another one that some people call the chestnut mandible toucan. It's been split, but that's the yelper. And they co-occur in the same general niches. It's a really interesting situation where they've diversified sexually. Here's a broad-billed mots are all over the place, and it's a shame I don't have a good picture of a mot tail, but mot tails have rackets on them, and they swing the rackets back and forth like pendulums. And you hear the mots in the mornings. They make whooping sounds and all kinds of other sounds, but that's a quintessential bird you find anytime you're in the tropics. Parrots, of course, parrots are all over the place in the tropic. Here's the yellow-crowned parrot, pretty common species. They nest in cavities like woodpeckers. They get usurped by lots of other birds too, but generally not so much in the mainland tropics. But if you're in, say, Puerto Rico, big pearly-eyed thrashers, which are big, like nasty mockingbirds, will chuck these big Amazonian parrots right out of their holes. Parrots are formidable, but not the most formidable thing out there. By the way, one of the nice things that's come out of the molecular revolution, amongst the millions of things that have come out of it, is a better understanding of how all birds are related to one another. We understand now that falcons are actually parrots, essentially. They're meat-eating parrots, which makes a lot of sense given their foot structure and other things like that. But anyway, that's for another day. Tanagers are another bird that's sort of a quintessential thing of the tropics. These are not like our tanagers. Our tanagers, the Tangara tanagers down there, are different. Ours are more like cardinals up here. Down there, they're their own clade or their own group of type of birds, and they come in a vast array of colors. But generally, there's some plain ones like this plain tanager, which when you see them in the book, you're like, yeah, come on. But when you see them in real life, they have very subtle colors and they're really very attractive. Love to see that thing with a UV camera. Next. But these are the things you see in the book that really just make your eyes pop. This is paradise tanager right here. There are lots of these Tangara tanagers. Everywhere you go in the tropics, there's usually a group of 4 or 5 types of Tangara tanagers, and they're pretty colorful. Here's another group of birds called the manakins. Man, Kevin Olman's here. He can tell you all about this because the mating systems of these birds is amazing. I mean, these guys in the Cotingas do some really incredible things. And if you want to laugh tonight, look up moonwalking bird or moonwalking mannequin, and you'll see the really interesting theatrical things that these birds do. They make little leks and they clean them, all kinds of stuff like that. Here's a puff bird. You might look at that thing and think, man, that is a really puffy bird. Like that bird has no neck. It has nothing but just a tube all the way down to the branch. That's a puff bird for you right there. That's a spotted puff bird. There are lots of blackbirds in the New World tropics too. Here we have orioles, right? We really covet our orioles up here. They're very colorful, but by tropical standards, orioles are small and, you know, they're interesting and everything, but they're not super diverse. Like when you get down into the tropics, you have caciques and oropendulas, these really big, essentially big orioles, kind of. Here's a big cacique right here. You can look at the honking bill on that thing. These are really enormous birds, and they make a lot of interesting noises. Sometimes they flip up and down underneath the branches, and they have these giant nests that are very pendulous, just like orioles do. And I think I have a couple more slides to rip through. This bird is really cool. I love this bird. These are all over the place as well. They're called euphonias. They usually make these little like pink calls. And like if you're a night flight birder, you love this kind of stuff because you know, first you're just overwhelmed by all the sounds, but then you start picking up on all these little euphonias, and there's usually 3 or 4 different species. They can be kind of tough to tell apart. Usually you look at the throat and a couple of other things, the undertail, for example, of some of these euphonias, like white-tailed euphonias. But what I find really cool about these things, they're a great example of what I was telling you about, how plants bribe animals do their work. And there's a kind of mutualism there. Sometimes it's commensalism, sometimes a little bit more than that. It helps both parties, but these birds are keying in on one type of fruit. Who can guess what it is? Think Christmas time. Mistletoe. That's exactly right. They eat the mistletoe. Now, mistletoe, when you start getting through the fleshy part has a lot of lipids, a lot of fats in it. It's really good for these birds. But when you start getting down there, plants, they're not dumb, right? They have a coat on the outside of their seeds to keep their seeds from getting digested. Well, that coat has a laxative in it.
Oh.
So these guys pick out the seeds, but the seeds also have a sticky membrane on it, on the inside underneath of the fruit. So when these guys poop and they hit the tree, they stick on the tree because mistletoes are parasitic plants. Pretty interesting. Cuckoos are another cool bird of the tropics. We have some cuckoos here. The Caribbean has a lot of really big lizard cuckoos that are very cool. But the New World tropics all throughout the mainlands has a lot of different kinds of cuckoos as well, including some really, really crazy ones, pheasant cuckoos, and these things, the anis. This bird is the worst smelling bird I've ever handled, ever. I couldn't get the smell off my hand for like 2 days, and my mist net stunk so bad. These birds, they have this big bill, and they live in family groups, and they also egg dump, but they're kind of like wood ducks, they'll communally egg dump. It's a really fascinating system. Last one here, and then we'll end. This is a jacamar. This is like, you know, I tell my kids all the time, don't run with pencils. But like this is, if you're frightened of birds, this would be the bird to be afraid of. Like, you don't want one of these things to fly into your eye when you're walking. But jacamars are cool. They make really cool sounds, and there's a whole bunch of them. Well, you know, thank you for being patient and rushing through this. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd be happy to answer a question. I think we have 1 minute. Yes.
If the small leaf cutter ants in the leaves and there are viruses on them, then what will happen to them?
Well, that's a great question. What they're mostly concerned about that's on the leaves is they don't want any other kind of fungus on those leaves because there are fungi that are parasitic of that sort of system that the leafcutter ants have created, which is part of the reason that leafcutter ants have so many little gardens essentially in their underground network, because when one gets contaminated, they essentially have like the hazmat crew of ants that comes in there and cleans it out entirely using their saliva. They will lick the walls of it and everything to make sure it's perfectly clean and sterile to reintroduce. So it's very costly to them to get an invader, some kind of fungus in there that they don't want to have.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Good job.